Well, welcome into my office at home. This is a brief video where I want to address a couple of things that I said in lecture 7. After I finished the lecture, I got to thinking that it probably would be a good thing to expand just a little bit on a couple of issues. So this is going to count as a outside reading, as a required reading assignment, and I'll do my best to keep it brief. The thing that I want to talk about is EFS. That's one of the things that you saw me put on the board. EFS simply means eternal functional subordination. And sometimes it goes by other names. It has gone by ERAS. You saw me write that on the board as well. Eternal relations of authority and submission. Sometimes it's simply referred to as ESS, the eternal subordination of the Son. But regardless of what acronym is used, it's all the same thing. Listen to the ERAS, eternal relations of authority and submission. And that's a lot different from what I've been teaching you in these lectures. In these lectures, I've made this statement more than once that the church historically has distinguished the persons of the Trinity by relations of origin. The Father is of none, the Son is begotten of the Father, and the Spirit is breathed out by both the Father and the Son. And that is how the church has historically distinguished the persons in the Trinity. EFS comes at it a little bit different. And it says, no, there's an authority within the relations of the Trinity. In fact, there's an authority that the Father has that the Son doesn't have. And then there's an authority that the Spirit lacks. And so he is subservient to the Son, and then the Spirit and the Son are both subservient to the Father. And so what ends up happening in EFS, they wouldn't say this. They don't believe this is what they're teaching. But what ends up happening is you have really a non-equality of persons in the Godhead, at least in the area of authority, that the Father has an authority the Son doesn't have, and that the Father and Son then have an authority that the Spirit doesn't have. And so it's, instead of distinguishing them, remember in the last lecture, the personal properties of the triune Godhead, or the persons. The personal properties were the Father's paternity, the Son filiation, and the Spirit passive spiration. Instead of seeing that as the way that the persons in the Godhead relate, they bring an authority and submission structure into the Trinity. Now, how do they get there? Why do they do this? And they do this by reading the New Testament, but I would say misappropriating some things that the New Testament says. So let's take an example. Jesus says, I didn't come to do my will, but the will of him that sent me. Well, let me tell you how that's been addressed, how that's been handled through the centuries, as the church has understood what Jesus was saying there. The Orthodox confessions, Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox theology has said that is an instance where we have the incarnate Son making a statement about who he is as a man in relation to God. So he is expressing this truth that he didn't come to do his will, but the will of the Father. His will in that text, we would believe, would be a reference to his human will. And he has not come to perform that will, but he has come to perform the will of the Father. But what EFS does is it takes a text like that, it reads it back up into the inner life of God. I don't have a board behind me, but remember the line that you've seen me draw, the creator-creature distinction. Well, the incarnation is below the line. It's an act of God, a work of God in time. And so Jesus, as the God-man, saying, I didn't come to do my will, but the will of him that sent me. Again, we would say that's a reference to what he would say as the man, Christ Jesus. But that statement is taken by the proponents of EFS and read back up above the line into the inner life of God. Maybe another example would be texts where we're told that the Son of God submitted. He humbled himself. He submitted. He was obedient. And that submission is said to be part of the inner life of God. So you've got a son that's been eternally submissive, and you've got a father that has had eternal authority over that son. And that's just not the way that the Trinity has been understood by the church, by Baptists for centuries. Baptists taught, at least the Baptists that knew what they were talking about, they taught that what distinguishes the persons is the relation of origins. The Father is of none, again. The Son is begotten by the Father, and the Spirit is breathed out by both the Father and the Son. And that's what distinguishes them. Their personal properties, their incommunicable personal properties. Only the Father can be the Father. Only the Son can be the Son. Only the Spirit can be the Spirit. Now, I know a lot about this, not just because I've done a lot of reading, but because I've gone myself through some of the trial and error of dealing with this particular approach to the Trinity. Just a little bit of background about me. When I was, I grew up, most of you know, I grew up in a pastor's home. And this is by no means, please don't think that I'm being ultra critical of my father. My dad was a simple man who preached a simple gospel, but was no theologian. And I can never remember hearing sermons that gave a detailed exposition of the Trinity. Just don't remember it. Maybe they were preached and I just don't recall, but I don't remember ever really being taught the things that you're getting in this class regarding the Trinity. The things that I'm giving you in this course about the Trinity are things that the church has confessed for centuries, okay? But for whatever reasons, I didn't get it growing up from sermons. I was not taught really detailed things about the Trinity in Sunday school classes. I believed in it. I believed that, there's God, and the Father, Son, and Spirit, they're God, and they're all equally God. But beyond that, not a lot of foundation laid for me. And then when I went off to Bible college, I really don't remember much of an in-depth study in this doctrine of God that I'm doing with you. I mean, we hit the basics. God's omnipresent, God's omniscient, God's omnipotent, and he's eternal. But man, when it came to the Trinity, there wasn't much really said about it. And I have to say the same thing's true about my seminary experience as well. I took a systematic theology class. Maybe more was said than I remember being said, but not much of I just didn't have a really robust, I would say, a robust understanding of Trinitarian doctrine. Well, in the early 2000s, I was given a book by Bruce Ware, who is a proponent of EFS. And then I consumed it. I read it, and I thought, well, this is really good. It makes sense. But without a understanding of what the confessions said about the Trinity and about what creeds said about the Trinity going back to the Nicene Creed and the Athanasian Creed. I didn't really have a strong foundation under me, so I just assumed what Bruce Ware was saying in his books. That had to be the correct view. There's just got to be some sort of ongoing authority and subordination relationship within the Trinity. Once I really began, though, to examine the doctrine of the Trinity as it had been taught historically, I began to realize, okay, the EFS approach is not the right approach. And, some of you will remember a book that I wrote, gosh, it's been over 10 years ago now, about the Trinity. And a lot of what I wrote in there is still very helpful. The thing about that I did in the lecture, the last lecture about the opposite of monotheism is tritheism, and the opposite of equality of persons is subordinationism. All that's still true. So none of that changed. Where I had to back off, where I had to push back, was when I started dealing with the issue of, is there subordination within the Godhead? And I came down on the side of what the church has said historically on the issue. This was some of you probably don't even know this. Somebody might know this, but this was a big blow up several years ago on the internet, on websites that were theologically oriented. Well, there's great big discussions. I want to say it took place in 2015, maybe 2016. But out of that discussion that took place, some books have been written that have helped to bring the church back to what it has historically said about the Trinity. So let me again just encourage you to maybe pick up this book and read it. It's not required for the course. It's just something I'm suggesting that would be good for you to read. Scott Swain's book on the Trinity, he deals with the EFS controversy, but not in that's not what the whole book's about. This entire book is not about the EFS controversy. It's just a small portion of what he deals with in the book. The book overall is what it says. It's an introduction, introduction to the doctrine of the Trinity. And it's a very, very helpful and thorough introduction for a short book. Let me recommend a couple of others quickly before I let you go. This book, Simply Trinity, written by Matthew Barrett. You can see Scott Swain actually wrote the foreword to this one. And what Matthew Barrett deals with is he deals with how there was a slide away from the Orthodox teaching regarding the Trinity, and how that some things that are said about the Trinity today that you find in popular books aren't true. Eternal submission being one of them. Anyway, he actually deals with the EFS issue in this book in chapter 8. You can see there is the Son eternally subordinate to the Father. That entire chapter approach is about the EFS issue. So he deals with it more in this book than Swain does in his introduction. If I said one of the two, I would tell you to get this one. Not that this one's not good. It's good, but I think this one probably would be easier for you to digest. And then let me just recommend this, okay? The Manual of Christian Doctrine. You can see here the author is Louis Berkhoff. You've heard me mention Berkhoff in this set of lectures. Berkhoff wrote this book long before there was an EFS controversy, long before. He died in the 50s, 1950s. And EFS, that controversy didn't come in along until the 90s, roughly. So when you read what he says about the Trinity, it is the Orthodox approach that the Baptist Confession upholds. Okay, and And so I would say, get this book and read it. It's about a lot more than the Trinity. It is a manual of Christian doctrine. So it covers a lot of different categories in systematic theology. Let me tell you, I will, in fact, if you look at the syllabus right next to where you clicked for this video, I've included a link where you can get this as a free PDF. Or if you do Kindle or iBooks, you can download it that way as well. Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I hope that makes sense. I hope it made sense. Let me just say this: if you have questions, please reach out to me. There are things we're doing in this course, I'm telling you, I never did in seminary. I never did in Bible college. I wish I had. I wish my instructors had taken the time to do a deep dive into the incommunicable attributes of God and explain to me what impassibility was and simplicity was. It wasn't given to me. So you're really getting in this course the benefit of some of the things that I've had to work through in coming to an understanding of what the church has historically said in its doctrine of God. Hope it's been helpful. So with that, I'm gonna end this video and see you then for lecture 8.